everyone, ready to dive into something pretty heavy. We're heading to what should be paradise, Southeast Asia, but we're going deep into the dark side this time. Cyber slavery, casino scams, you name it. And we're focusing on Sihanoukville, Cambodia.
Once a sleepy beach town now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you'll hear all about it.
Right, we've got documentaries, research papers, even firsthand accounts lined up. We really want to get into how these issues are all connected and the real people paying the price for all this so-called development.
It's fascinating, really, how Sihanoukville became such a hotspot for, well, illicit activities. We want to figure out the why behind the what, you know?
Absolutely. And speaking of what, that documentary Behind Asia's Cyber Slavery, that one really stayed with me. KK Park in Myanmar, it's like a modern-day slave camp, but for cybercrime.
Yeah, and the level of organization is just chilling. They showed actual how-to manuals for running these online scams. Everything from, like, romance scams to these really intricate cryptocurrency things.
I know, right? And they were so detailed, like something you'd get at, I don't know, some legit company training. That's what's so disturbing about it.
It's incredibly predatory.
One line from those manuals that stuck in my head: make clients fall in love with you so deeply that they forget everything.
It's like they're weaponizing emotions.
And the crazy thing is, it works. The documentary showed millions of euros flowing through these cryptocurrency wallets, all traced back to KK Park.
It's unbelievable. And this is where Broken Tooth comes in, right? This crime boss they mentioned. Yeah, Broken Tooth.
Yeah.
He's like a ghost, this shadowy figure with suspected ties to the triads, Chinese investors, maybe even parts of the Chinese government itself.
It's like something out of a movie. They didn't outright connect him to KK Park in the documentary, but I don't know, his presence is just there, you know, looming over everything.
Absolutely. But this brings us to a question. Why Sihanoukville? What makes it such a strategic location for these operations?
Right. Why Cambodia?
Well, geographically, it's close to China, right? Easy access. But it's more than that. Sihanoukville especially has become a prime spot for Chinese investment lately. Much of it tied to that Belt and Road Initiative.
The Belt and Road Initiative. It's one of those things I always meant to learn more about.
Basically, it's China's way of building global influence, you know, through massive infrastructure projects. We're talking roads, railways, ports, everything. They're pouring billions of dollars into countries across Asia, Africa, even Europe.
And Sihanoukville plays into this.
Big time. See, with this deepwater port, it's a strategic asset for China's trade routes.
Right.
Like a key link in this new Silk Road they're building.
So on the surface, it's about economic development, but it also gives China a strategic foothold. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And all this money flowing in, while good for Cambodia's economy on paper, it's created this perfect environment for exploitation.
Which brings us to those casinos, right? Cambodia's casino gamble really showed how many there are now. Over 100, they said, and most of them catering to wealthy Chinese gamblers.
Over 100 casinos in Sihanoukville alone. It's mind-boggling.
But isn't gambling illegal in China? Why Cambodia?
It's a gray area. See, it's banned for Chinese citizens within mainland China, but not explicitly illegal for them to gamble internationally. So Sihanoukville's casinos, they exploit that loophole.
Wow, clever, but also
shady. Oh, yeah. They even have online gambling platforms now, so people in China can gamble remotely through live streams, basically exporting gambling and getting around their own country's regulations.
Wow, that's something. But what about the people working in these casinos? The documentaries, they kind of hinted at some pretty bad conditions.
Yeah, you're right. They claim to be creating jobs for Cambodians, and maybe some are, but the reality is a lot of these workers face exploitation. Low wages, terrible conditions, the whole 9 yards.
And then there's child labor too, right? That story about Sock Leap, the woman forced to work in a casino since she was 15? Heartbreaking.
It really highlights the human cost of all this unchecked development. And it's not just casinos either. That academic paper, Development in Sihanoukville Under Chinese Influence, it showed this whole pattern of land grabs and local communities getting displaced.
So it's the haves versus the have-nots. And in this case, the Chinese investors are the ones holding all the cards.
It's a good way to put it. The research goes into how all this Chinese money has driven property prices through the roof. Locals can't afford to live there anymore.
Priced out of their own communities.
Exactly. And in some cases, they're being forcibly evicted just to make way for these new developments.
And it's like, even worse, the research talks about how the Cambodian government is actually helping to make these land deals happen. For the Chinese investors, I mean. No transparency, nothing.
Yeah, it's really disheartening. It's like they're rolling out the red carpet, you know?
Yeah.
Foreign investment at any cost, even if it means their own citizens get trampled on.
Right. It's a tough spot for the Cambodian government, though. I get that. They need that foreign investment to boost their economy.
Absolutely. It's a tough balancing act, trying to attract foreign capital, but also protect your own people. And it doesn't seem like they've quite found that balance yet.
Definitely not. It's like this classic dilemma, right? A lot of developing countries face this. But it's not just the economics of it all, is it? The research also talked about cultural displacement, too, with all this Chinese influence in Sihanoukville.
Right. Right. I mean, you have this huge influx of Chinese businesses and residents, right? So naturally, the cultural landscape starts to shift. Local businesses get replaced, Mandarin becomes more common.
Which, I mean, cultural exchange isn't inherently a bad thing, right?
Of course not. But when it happens this fast, this drastically, it's overwhelming. People lose their sense of place, their identity. It's tough.
It's like their home is changing right in front of them. And not always for the better. But this isn't limited to just Sihanoukville, is it? This is the Belt and Road Initiative playing out in other countries, too.
Absolutely. I mean, they frame it as...
So it's not just roads and ports, it's about China gaining influence.
Exactly, securing their own interest. And that brings us back to the question, who's really benefiting from all this development? Because, yeah, Chinese investment has helped Cambodia's economy grow, there's no denying that. But it's not reaching everyone equally.
Yeah, it feels very top-heavy.
Very much so. A select few are reaping the rewards while everyone else is, well, they get left behind.
Like a tale of two cities, but within Sihanoukville itself, you have those gleaming casinos, those luxury resorts, all for wealthy foreigners.
Right, and then a few blocks over, you have communities struggling to get by.
And those are the communities bearing the brunt of all the negative consequences we've been talking about.
Right.
The exploitation, the displacement, even the environmental damage.
It's tragic, really.
Speaking of the environment, we can't ignore that. All our sources, they painted a pretty bleak picture of what's happening to Sihanoukville's natural environment.
It's hard to overstate the damage. All this construction, often completely unregulated, it's led to deforestation, soil erosion, polluted water.
Those once pristine beaches, now they're just
littered with garbage. Yeah. And the marine life is suffering too, of course. It's all connected.
It's almost ironic they're destroying the very things that attracted people to Sihanoukville in the first place. The natural beauty, that relaxed atmosphere.
It's the epitome of short-sightedness, isn't it? Prioritizing profit over everything else. If you destroy the environment, you destroy your livelihood in the process. They're killing the goose that lays the golden egg.
That's so true. But are they doing anything to address this? Are there any environmental regulations in place to protect Sihanoukville at all?
That's where it gets even more complicated.
Yeah.
On paper, Cambodia does have environmental laws. But enforcing them? That's a different story.
Corruption?
Rampant. The research talked about how these environmental impact assessments, they're often ignored entirely or just, manipulated to appease the investors.
And anyone who tries to speak out against it
risks a lot. Intimidation, threats. It can get ugly.
It's like this awful cycle they can't escape. The government needs that investment, so they ignore the environmental damage, which makes the environment worse, which makes it less appealing to tourists, which hurts their economy in the long run.
The classic tragedy of the commons. Short-term gains win out over long-term sustainability. And, as always, it's the most vulnerable who end up paying the price.
It feels so distant, like it's happening over there, but it doesn't really touch us.
That's the thing about a globalized world, though. It's all connected, whether we see it or not.
So what we do here matters, even if it's just, buying our coffee from a different company or...
Every purchase, every investment we make, even just the stuff we read online, it all feeds into this system one way or another.
So it's about being conscious consumers then, really thinking about where our money's going, what we're supporting.
Awareness is the first step. Once you understand how the pieces fit together, the economics, the power dynamics, the people caught in the middle, that's when you can make informed choices.
I'll admit, the cyber slavery stuff really got to me. Like, I always knew scams were bad, but realizing there are actual people being trafficked, forced to run those schemes, that's next level awful.
Right. And the scary part is they're only getting more sophisticated, preying on our emotions, our trust.
So we have to be smarter.
Exactly. Educate yourself on the tactics scammers use. Be careful what you share online, who you trust. Double check everything.
Be our own little internet detective.
Exactly. Question everything, be skeptical, dig a little deeper. It can make all the difference.
This whole deep dive, honestly, it's been eye-opening. It's so easy to stay in our own little bubbles, But looking at these issues, even in a place like Sihanoukville, It reminds us what really matters.
Our shared humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
makes you realize we can do something. It's not hopeless.
Right. Like, we highlighted those people rescuing cyber slaves from KK Park, putting their own lives on the line.
And those local activists, the journalists, everyone speaking out against injustice. So much courage.
It's inspiring, for sure. But you're right, admiring it from afar isn't enough.
Sure. What can our listeners do? Where do we even start?
Oh, there's so much. Support organizations fighting human trafficking, do your research on companies, look for ethical sourcing, stay informed about what's happening in the world, and use your voice. Vote. Write to your representatives. Talk to your friends and family.
It all adds up.
It really does. Even small actions multiplied across millions of people.
Yeah.
That's how we create change.
That's a good point. We're not powerless. We can all make a difference. Wow, that was a lot, this deep dive. Heavy stuff. But if it makes even one person think twice, question things, look a little closer, then it was worth it. Thanks for coming on this journey with us, everyone. We'll see you next time.